Okay, we have, that was 7.2. 7.3, consideration of consistency of the scope of the Lake County Fish and Wildlife Advisory Committee with needs to support the population of the Chi, Clear Lake Hitch, and possible direction to staff. This is from our Ag Commissioner and Admin Office. Chai. Sorry.
Cheese. That's cheese.
Oh.
Good morning, Board. Catherine Vanderwall, Agricultural Commissioner. So last week, your board requested some clarifications regarding the purpose and scope of the Lake County Fish and Wildlife Advisory Committee. So the purpose and responsibilities of the committee can be found in the resolution that was adopted by your board last week on page 3 under powers and functions as it's listed. So these items include various items, but notably item number 3, which is to consider specific items referred to the committee by the Board of Supervisors for recommendation, study, or report. And item 5, to hold public meetings, workshops, or presentations on topics of local, state, or federal significance relative to fish and wildlife conservation, recreation, and protection. So in addition, another topic of clarification was to determine if this committee, the Fish and Wildlife Advisory Committee, is the appropriate body to address elements of the county's response to the declining Clear Lake Hitch population. And I believe Terry has information on the different committees right now that are or could potentially be addressing this topic.
Yes, thank you. During your board's discussion I believe it was in January, I put together a chart of all of the committees that could. It's not that they necessarily do, but they could, because it could be under their purview. And so there's the Blue Ribbon Committee for the Rehabilitation of Clear Lake, which is under the California Department of Natural Resources. They have 2 active technical subcommittees that are not governed by CNRA. And then there's county appointed positions, the tribes, Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board, and UC Davis. The Lake County Fish and Wildlife Advisory Committee, I adjusted this chart to add the 2 tribal government representatives. Then the Lake County Agricultural Committee, Advisory Committee, that has 2 county supervisors. Obviously, that's been pretty specific to agriculture, not necessarily to wildlife. Then there's the Clear Lake Hitch Conservation Strategy, which your board has heard about. That's headed up by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. That's been going on for years, and it has county participation. It is definitely discussing the Clear Lake Hitch. That's what it is for. Then there's the Clear Lake Hitch Task Force that was convened this fall, I believe, by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, which I have been participating on, as well as the Lake County Watershed Protection District. And then the GSPAC, the Big Valley Groundwater Sustainability Plan Advisory Committee. That one, it has to do with water in the Big Valley, but it's not the entire watershed. And it is very specific and has regulations, state-governed regulations. So with that particular one, I don't think it's at all appropriate. And those are the committees that could work locally.
Any comment? Supervisor Spatier.
While I think that it's definitely a topic that should not necessarily be outside of the scope of Fish and Wildlife Committee, it seems to me that there's already some larger task force that is attempting to review what is going on, what are the solutions, and I think that duplication of efforts should not be what we ask for. I think that we need to make sure to focus on an area or a committee that is looking to make those happen. So I'm in favor of either the Clear Lake Hitch Conservation Strategy or the Clear Lake Hitch Task Force. I'm not quite certain what exactly the difference is other than the federal being more involved with the Clear Lake Hitch Conservation Strategy. I kind of wish those two would kind of blend together, I guess, rather than having two separate conversations. I don't know how much they parallel or complement one another. But I think that if there are, let's say, small grants or small projects that come out of those conversations and it goes to the Fish and Wildlife because they do have some funds available to be able to say, yes, we want to support that kind of project, I think that would be appropriate. But to ask our county committee to hire a fish biologist or some sort of scientific capability to really provide guidance and solutions versus working with those that already have access to those experts, I think is just not an efficient way of using our time and our dollars. And that's my...
Well, I think this is the one venue where the public and community can participate. And I think that it would be a great place as an education forum to workshop some of the ideas that might come out of the other groups. And also look at maybe small localized projects like encouraging stream cleanup, those kinds of things that are kind of directly in the community, and try and get some of that work kind of happening locally and maybe quickly. So those were the thoughts that I had. I don't want to, this is an advisory council that meets every other month, so obviously they're not going to have a heavy workload. We're going to ask them to create policy or anything like that, but this is a good place to have forum, education, and workshops. Supervisor Green.
Yeah, I wouldn't even limit it. She has the very amazing map. So a couple things. To the point that the GSPAC would have no role, I think they're going to end up hearing some of this by default. Should they be the primary focus? Probably not. But I only pointed that out because it's there, it's existing, it's a useful process. So I do think they can and will have some ability to provide input on projects occurring in Big Valley, at least, at some appropriate time. I like the idea of the Fish and Wildlife Committee meeting more frequently and paying attention to these issues more frequently because, again, the map points out it's really hard to follow the bouncing ball, even when we talk about something as simple, a proper name, Adobe Creek Conjunctive Use Project. Well, we're pitching that to 3 different projects at this point. One, it's been rebranded as Big Valley Fish Habitat. One we just heard earlier today. And so I think having a dedicated committee that can help this board pay attention to those issues and elevate them to the board at some appropriate time when we do need to do that, I think that's responsive to Chair Pyska's concerns that we do need to stay front and center on this. Yes, we do have seats on those state and federal task forces, but those things exist in their world. Maybe there's Bagley Keene open meetings, maybe there aren't, depending where it's at. We have a committee, we have a Brown Act openness, we have local community members giving input, and they can help. They can be our local eyes and ears and really help this board navigate it, even in just the 6 weeks since we did the emergency proc. So many different things have happened, and it's really hard to keep track. And I like the idea of this committee doing that. In terms of staff support, my only question for Director Vanderwall is Ag Advisory. You already have a pretty big lift there, and I appreciate all the hard work you put on that. So this has been tasked with you right now. So if we do spin up a nice size Fish and Wildlife Committee, and we're going to ask for some staff support for that. Is that within your current bandwidth to accommodate?
My question would be, what would that entail? Because the way the committee is set up, the group itself needs to designate a chair, a vice chair, and then a secretary. So my staff is, of course, willing and helping, assisting with getting the agenda ready, getting it out, and getting it posted, as well as the approved minutes.
And 6 meetings a year.
Right.
Yeah. And the Ag Advisory Committee meets a minimum 2 times a year, but as needed. So I don't think either of them are a big lift.
Right.
Any other comments from the board? Go ahead.
I think that since the proclamation, obviously, we've got so much traction and really focus on it. And, I'm kind of the mind, too, of not just sticking it in one advisory committee, as the projects come up, or whether it's water resources, or it's one of the tribes looking for the support from one of the committees. I really think that's the synergy that we need to just continue with, and saying, hey, this is just going to be the focus on that, because there's so many things, obviously, that we see from the county level, but also the federal partners, which are the tribal partners that are working on this all the time. I think that collaboration, so, I don't want to bog down one committee with it, just making sure that we're engaged. And I think the changes that were made on the 21st, adding the 2 tribal representatives to the Fish and, I got confused now, the Fish and Wildlife Committee, puts us that voice and that missing conversation all the time on, okay, let's stay focused on, the Hitch or the Chai. As we move forward through this process, and we saw that collaboration today with, the Watershed Protection District bringing forward that. So those are my thoughts on it from a holistic standpoint to help with the Hitch, so. Because we do have a lot of good work going on right now, and as long as we stay focused on it with that proclamation, I think we're going to move in the right direction.
And if the weather helps out too.
The weather definitely helps, but, the beginning planning processes, which we approved today, there are some obstructions or other things, and I know we're looking at going at all in different directions, but whether the feds are looking at it or the state agencies, as they're bringing this together, they're looking for that collaboration. And the board made a big step of that, of doing the proclamation, and I think that's going to help drive us across the finish line where we need to go. That's what I truly believe, and that's what they're looking for from the Fed and the state level, so.
The local collaboration?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, and then we have quite a bit of overlap with the
Yeah.
people that have been appointed on this advisory committee. And I think this is really where we get that community engagement and then get recommendations brought here to us. Okay. I'm not seeing anyone in the public. Is there anyone here in the chambers on this item? And I don't see any hands up in the Zoom room. So I will bring it back here. And the action here is directing staff.
I probably confused everything, but obviously with the proclamation, we just want to stay focused on, we have so many different agencies and just making sure that all the ag advisory committees, the Fish and Wild, that we've got that one vision and we're just working together. So for me, I really think we have the ability to do that, obviously, whether it's in the communication of the meetings or the Ag Advisory Fish and Wildlife Committee saying, hey, we got a project we're going to be supporting, we want to bring it to the board, and just making sure that we stay focused in that manner. And I think, like I said, some of the stuff we had today is bringing it, and I know you only meet every other month as we're moving through that process, but all the other committees and conversations that are going on, there's opportunities to call special meetings or bring board items or approaching a supervisor and said, hey, we really got to look at this one to make sure that we continue that positive moving forward. That's where I'm at. I really see it as that proclamation was the final step. We were always right there, but that puts us in the point to, I think that's enough direction. There's an emergency and we need to focus on it.
Okay. Supervisor Sabatier.
So don't want to add something to it, but just, I guess, a simple request. Obviously need consensus before it happens, but maybe sharing the agenda for the Fish and Wildlife Advisory with our water resources so that they make sure that they're aware of what discussions are happening there, so they can maybe provide the same comments back in reverse. I just think it's important to continue that meshing of our departments who are on different task forces to ensure that we're well aware of what's going on as well, not just relying on the memberships to make those things happen.
Well, Angela is appointed.
Did we appoint Angela?
Yeah.
We did.
She is.
She's appointed. So we have county staff, we have tribal leadership, and then we have all of our other representatives. So we have
I had
great
forgotten about that.
representation there.
Probably
That's what I was talking, that's why
time
we've
ago.
got so much overlap there. So I think everybody that's, there's a lot of tentacles out there, and I think this is going to be that perfect community forum for reporting out and moving things forward. So we have consensus on that direction?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, Supervisor Green?
Yeah, and just to clarify, I think there'll be consensus that we wouldn't, we're going to staff up, we're going to get the appointments done, we're going to get the committee up and running and basically let them set their own agenda. Clearly, they're going to absorb a lot of chi-related issues moving forward. But there's other broader things that came up too. I started sniffing around some of the game fishing regulations. Obviously, the biggest repository of fish is something we don't have direct jurisdiction over, and that's Clear Lake. And just for educational purposes, there are special regulations applicable to Clear Lake, applying the game fish contests, and having some understanding of that, making sure that not just our local people are aware of that, but also people coming in. There's a place for public outreach and education through that as well. So just a suggestion, and when the new committee gets up and running, maybe helping the county, helping us follow what's happening at the state level, in particular with CDFW and California Fish and Game Commission. Yes, they're going full speed right now, but there've been maybe one or two things happen that we were not aware of, and it would be helpful to have kind of an early warning system in place so that we are acutely aware of any pending state changes.
So that brings up another point. We have developed the cannabis task force to kind of do a lot of this work too. So if an item comes from a supervisor, it comes to the board here, we decide as a board to send it to community development, who then sends it to the task force. So because we've got volunteers and they meet so infrequently every other month, I think if there's something that a supervisor wants to bring to that advisory committee, that it come to the board first. And then
Yeah, I'm in
we
agreement
can
with
agree
that.
with that
Yeah.
and then send it there. How does that sound? Yes? Consensus on that too? Okay. All right, well,
Madam Chair?
yes.
If I may make just a point of clarification, the staff memo is requesting specific direction to the Agricultural Commission.
Yes.
As a possible additional direction, your board may want to consider just generally the second to the last paragraph of that memo, which with regards to direction of staff, in this case Agricultural Commission, to consult and assign Hitch-focused work for recommendation, study, or report to the Lake County Fish and Wildlife Advisory Committee in light of the discussion that has taken place today.
Okay, so do we agree that the language is sufficient?
Yes.
Okay, I agree. You too?
You're talking about within the bylaws?
Within the bylaws?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially I forget what the section is called, the powers or
Hours and functions.
powers and functions is where it details, and it's broad enough to allow a diverse number of topics. So,
Okay. Did we complete everything
Yes,
for
thank you.
this item? Thank you, Lloyd. Okay, so we are finished with this item, which, oh, shoot, I lost my place.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank
Kevin.
you.